You're listening to Life Check Yourself with life coach, transformational leader, and dating and relationship badass, Marni Batista. Every week, you'll get the raw truth from top experts and real people on the important life and love issues you want to know about. So if you're ready to life check yourself in your relationships, your career, and the areas of your life that matter most to you, and you're not afraid to be called out on your stuff, then you're ready for what's next.
Life Check Yourself with Choyo Wilson-Daniels, the number one reason you're not making more money. Hello, ladies. Welcome to Life Check Yourself. You are going to freaking love what I have for you today. If you have money blocks, if you're not making as much money as you want, if you feel like you can't do what you want because you're afraid about money, if you feel like there's never enough money, if you feel like you're selling your time for money, Choyo Wilson-Daniels is one of the premier mindset coaches for Christian women. She founded Loveshift Coaching in 2018 to support women who long to run their own business on their own damn terms, so that as a woman, as a human, you can make a powerful difference in the world. She is a seasoned entrepreneur, and she teaches her truth from her own struggles as a business owner. She wanted to be an entrepreneur who made an impact, but every time she tried to move forward, she felt blocked and things fizzled out. Her breakthrough was when she started loving, appreciating, and being herself. It's what we're all about here on the show. So now she's supporting and empowering hundreds of women by showing them how to be a richer person inside and out. I love it. And also, I just am super excited to chat to you because, I mean, let's just start with like one of the biggest limiting beliefs that I think people have is that I can't do what I really want to do because of insert whatever excuse it is, right? Like, I'm not good enough. Other people are depending on me. I'm not capable. I'm not qualified. Like, when you think about people sort of not living life on their own terms, when they have that desire to create more abundance, let's just start with what holds women back.
Okay, great. And hello. And I'm just so excited to be here. And you hit the nail on the head. That is the most common block that I see. And it is, I'm not enough. And it comes in so many shape, forms, and fashion. But the root of it is, I'm not enough. I need to get more certifications. I need to get more degrees. I need to lose weight. I'm not smart enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't have enough money. It's just, I'm not enough.
And I think this is just so interesting because I think and I'd love to hear what you think about this, but I almost feel like the smarter we are, the more we believe those limiting beliefs. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And it seems like the gap gets wider from what we want and what we actually have in our lives.
Ooh, say more about that. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think people even allow themselves to even dream for what they want because they're so good at like just tolerating, or they believe their limiting beliefs are the truth?
Right. A lot of women struggle with dreaming big and actually dreaming again. That died in them years and years and years ago. And for women with children, typically once the kids came into the picture, all of their dreams like died by the wayside.
And it's so interesting because for those of the ladies who are listening who are single, you know, and you have kids, because I know for me, when I had that moment, I got divorced, my kids were little, I knew my alimony was going to end. I sort of was like, what am I going to do? And I remember I lived in a really nice house. I had all these things for my marriage. And Choyo used to sit there and think like, am I going to be sitting in like a 1-room apartment with like, you know, a folding lawn chair, and my kids will never want to come hang out with me because I'll be in the lawn chair and their dad will be like, you know, in his nice ass house in Los Angeles. But I felt like it would never happen. So I knew that I wanted to do more, but I was also super terrified of it. So when someone's in that situation and they feel like their circumstances are 100% limiting, right? Where do you start?
Yes, and that is one of the most difficult places to be in. And I think it's so common for a lot of women to look at circumstances to dictate what they're going to be or where they are. So my suggestion would be to suspend all of the conditions. As hard as that is, we're going to act like we're going to turn off our senses and act like those conditions are not there. So it takes us into the fourth dimension where we're in our imagination. So my suggestion is get a real clear picture of who you want to be, where you want to be, what you want to be doing, and go there often in your mind. Tap on your imagination, because once you're in your imagination and you see this beautiful picture, it's going to create these emotions for you. And when you feel good, you're going to act different. And when you have that high vibe, as I like to call it, or this feel good energy, you're going to get into action and you're going to start doing things that's in alignment with that vision that you have imagined in your mind.
I just love this. So I did this exercise where I imagined 3 possible life alternatives. I did this recently, but what happened was I did one that was like the life I have now. And then one was if I literally something happened and like I absolutely couldn't do what I do. So I couldn't be a writer. I couldn't be a coach. And I remember like that moment that you're talking about, like where I had to be like, what if I got rid of circumstance? What would I actually do? And it kind of blew my mind because my first reaction was, well, like there is nothing else to do, which shows you like the power of the reality that you create by what you're experiencing currently.
Right.
And so I sat there and I was like, well, I mean, I guess I could be a teacher. I was a teacher. I have a teaching degree, right? And then my brain went to limits. I was like, yeah, I'll never make any money being a teacher. But from that place, I was like, okay, but I'm a teacher. What can I do? And I actually got a new business idea that I never actually pursued. But so when someone gets rid of the circumstances, why does that get you into the fourth dimension? Like, what about that, removing, it's almost like you're walking into a different world almost, right?
Right. And because if you're focused on the lack and the limitations, then you're just creating more of the same. So if we can focus our attention, and I'm not saying all day long, just be this positive person and bypass your reality. But if we can spend a lot of our time in our imagination, then we will start to see our world, our physical world starting to shift. And I think it's so important to remember that everything happens twice. It first have to happen in our mind. And if we're never going to that place, we will never see it. So we really have to hold these images, hold those desires in our mind first, and then we will be able to hold them in our hand. And a lot of times people don't want to visualize or go to the fourth dimension. They, as toxic as it sounds, they are so comfortable with looking at the conditions that's in opposition to what they want.
Well, right, because it's interesting. So let's talk about money, because I think this is like, I love this topic. So I was doing some work and I realized, over when I was in my little money evolution, and I realized, Choyo, that after I got my divorce, and even in college, I traced it back. The only time I quote unquote got money, right, or had money was when I presented myself as a victim, right? Like, oh, poor Marni, right? Like, wow. I would call, my dad was like trying to teach me a lesson, when I was in college and get me I don't know, hardly any money. And I would be like, oh, I don't have any money. And I got all these jobs. But I would call my cousin and she would be felt bad for me. And she would here, you deserve to take yourself out to dinner, or like, you know what, it's kind of bullshit that your dad's not getting you any help, because he could, by the way, you know, for like your laundry and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. And then I got divorced, and I had to hold this position of like telling my ex-husband like I was broke ass, right? Because that's the only way he'd be nice to me, right? Or give me money. And so I realized that for me, I was holding myself in that limitation. Like that was my identity. Like, oh, well, if, you know, the only way I can get money is if people need to help me.
That's a huge awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. But I didn't even know it was there. Like I was making money and I was doing stuff, but that would always be my default. I didn't want anyone to be like, think I was like successful, because then I was like, well, I'll never get any help. I know, it's some deep shit. So let's talk about money blocks. Well, let's trace it back. First of all, I know you primarily work with Christian women. I'm Jewish. Like there was like, I have generational like money stuff about like being cheap, right? Like it's just like it's a stereotype, right? But it was true for my family, generations, right? Of like, you know, we're frugal, like we're cheap, like, you know, don't generosity. There was like a really interesting line around generosity. So I grew up with my dad. The way he was going to teach me to be independent was to just like really withhold, right? So I did get resourceful and industrious. It's probably why I'm a great entrepreneur, right? There's a good side of all of these, but it was a long ass journey, right? So where do our money blocks come from? How do they connect? Like, how do they impact those dreams and those limitations and what we really want?
Yes, it's definitely generational. And our blocks form by the time we turn 7 or 8 years old. All of our money beliefs were formed and programmed and strong. So as an adult, if you have never stopped to reevaluate your money beliefs, you're really operating off of your parents' money beliefs, or your pastors or your teachers, or whoever had that influence over you at that time. And it's so critical that we do a reevaluation, because a lot of our parents or grandparents were raised in the Great Depression. Yeah. So there's a lot of scarcity, you know, that mindset. And it was just passed on from generation to generation to generation. And if we're not careful now, we're passing that on to our children as well. So the money beliefs, the money blocks, the money paradigms came from childhood in your environment. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so I'm just curious. So I told you mine, you tell me yours. Like, do you have, what's your what's your first awareness of like a message or a belief about money?
So I came from a middle class household. My parents were entrepreneurs on and off, but there was always this struggle energy, this lack energy, like there's never enough, or it's paycheck to paycheck. I remember waiting on my father to close a contract. So once he closed the contract, we would have this feast or famine. So it was good for like a month or two. And then it will level back off again, and we'll wait for another contract. So we went back to living from contract to contract or paycheck to paycheck when they went back to being wage earners. So as a result, that was my money story. That was my money belief, that there's never enough. So even making 6 figures when I was out on my own, single, graduated from grad school, even making 6 figures, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, because that was my programming, and that came from childhood.
Yeah, it's so insane. And I think about, so I did this like, so when I traced it back to my family, my dad's side are like genealogy, they're into it. And I realized that my great grandfather, is that right? Yeah. He lived through, so he came from Russia. He lived through like the panic of 1918. Then he lived through the Depression. Wow. You wonder why they were cheap? Right. All right. And then he lived through World War II. Right. And he had a business. And so what he did was to keep his business going. He, during the Depression, he didn't take a salary himself. Right. He didn't pay himself so that he could keep his business going to the bare minimum. And I had this awareness, and I'd love for you to talk about this. About as we develop a healthy relationship with money, I had this visualization, this moment with God. And I got this message that was sort of we did not suffer so that you suffer. We don't want that for you. We worked our ass off so that you could have this ability for consciousness and choice. And our intention is your ancestors aren't for you to suffer. So we give you permission to let it go. And I was just whoa. I've also felt that's so much responsibility. Now I'm responsible for the legacy. So how do you shift it, Choyo? How do you, what do you do to start developing that healthy relationship with money and break down all that generational money trauma?
Yeah, well, initially it's first just really identifying it. So really uncovering it. Like you were saying earlier, and it sounded like you've done a lot of work to become aware of those beliefs. So it's uncovering it, and then it's building a new belief, because that belief was developed through repetition. You didn't just hear it or experience it one time. It was over and over. You saw it, you felt it, and then the belief got stronger and stronger. So we have to reverse engineer that. And so we don't focus on that story anymore. Now that we are aware of it, we create a brand new model of what we do want. So all our attention is turned to this new model. And we do that by the visualization. We do that by affirmation, and just really focusing on what we want. And for an example, I used to focus on the debt that I was in. And guess what? I kept creating
more debt. Woohoo!
Right. So now my goal card is, I'm so happy and grateful now that I earn $80K a month. So guess what? I'm focusing on abundance. So now I'm creating abundance.
That goes a long damn way in Iowa.
Oh, yes, definitely. Now in New York, I would have to change my money goal, but in Iowa.
We're just joking, ladies, because I grew up in Iowa. Because I have because I lived in Los Angeles, and I'm trying to figure out where I want to live when I grow up. But sometimes I'm oh my God, Iowa. Maybe I should go back to Iowa. It's the Midwest. It's so amazing. But that's so huge because, and that kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, right? Because if your conditions are your truth, and you're oh, well, I'm always in debt, I can't do this, I have to do this, then you just keep recreating it over and over. It's you keep going over those neural pathways freaking over and over again. So, and in your world, how does this all connect back to self-worth and self-appreciation and self-love, that creation of that?
Yeah, so it's definitely a self-image piece, and we have to do an image maker, because we can't outperform our self-image. So if my self-image is or was, I'm not enough, then for me, what happened was I went back and continuously got degrees. And after each degree, I still didn't feel like I was enough. And so it wasn't until I did the work on my self-image that I was able to outperform those boundaries. So it's so critical that we really get clear on our identity and who we really are.
Yeah, because if I'm walking around the world thinking I'm a broke ass woman who needs help from other people, then that's how I'm going to be. And so if I create a new identity where I am enough and abundant, and I can release all the limiting beliefs, the generational trauma, and be a powerful creator of abundance of all sorts, then I'm just even when I just say it as an example, I just feel it different in my body. It's so freaking powerful. Yeah. So tell me, what are some of the ways that you start to step into that healthy place of self self-love, like abundant self-love to create abundance financially?
Yeah. So what I thought I was missing, I had to start giving it to myself as it relates to love, attention, worth. So I had to start giving it to myself first and stop looking outside of self to get that love, attention, and validation. And so when I start loving myself, putting that demand on me versus putting it on someone else, then things shift for me when I realize that wealth is within. It's not the money. That's a tool, that's a symbol of wealth, but our wealth is internal and it's invisible and it's spiritual. And when I realized that, that shifted so much for me.
Wow.
So
I'm just like feeling that, like when you said it's spiritual, like, and sort of like in a universal way, are you saying that like, because universe, God, source, whatever you call it, is like intends that for you, is part of you? Like, how do you message that? How do you envision that?
definitely the same, whether it's God, the universe, or whoever, that same creative energy is in all of us. So if I have that same creative energy in me, I can create what I want to create. And so that belief makes me show up different in the world. That belief release some of the anxiety. That belief release some of the fears about the lack of money in me.
I love it. Okay, so we talked a lot about like some mindset and spiritual things. So let's talk about like practical things that someone can do. So like, what do you think is the most common thing that women aren't doing? Is it that they're not dreaming? Is it they have a dream and they say like, next year I'm going to do this, or I'm waiting until this happens to do that? Like, what's the most common sort of like mindset that keeps people wanting to do better and wanting to be, in a positive identity, but they just, are still stuck? What do they want to do typically?
So I think it is, we don't make decisions. And we don't make decisions because our conditions are not quote unquote perfect. So we're waiting on these conditions and circumstance to be ideal before we walk into our purpose, before we start dreaming, before we start taking a risk. And I think that's like the number one thing that's holding people back, is they're basing stepping out on faith or taking a risk on their bank accounts, on their educations, on if they're getting support from their husband, versus making the decision, not knowing the how, but just knowing that it will all work out because you're in action.
Well, right. Yeah. And if it doesn't, what?
If it doesn't, it's just a test. And we have to change our relationship with failure and look at failure the exact same way as we look at success. It's all needed.
I love that. I was just doing this meditation this morning, and it was it was called gratitude for the duality. It was people like the tapping solution. And it was really talking about like how that, like we have this myth that life is going to be perfect, or if we do this one thing, it's going to be happy, or, whatever it is. And in it was sort of reminding me that like in that failure has to be there so it can show us, right? Then like, how do we adapt or adjust, or what did we learn from it that is actually going to keep us on the path towards our dream, which I think too, that the divine wants that for us. And all of these little adventures, I call them experiments, whether they're successful or fail. I feel like it feels better when it's an experiment. Right? Like it's just the universe's way of saying, okay, you had to have that so you could get here. So it sounds also like you have to completely redefine or de-emphasize failure.
Right. And I remind myself all the time, Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times. I have to be willing to have that type of energy to love my vision that much, that if it takes 10,000 times, I'm willing to fail 10,000 times.
Well, right. And I think what you're talking about, what you're so amazing at is like, because if you're in tune with that divine part of inside of you, then like when you keep tweaking it, you get closer and closer and closer. To me, it's like tuning in, like, I know for young people, this sounds like you're like, what's a radio? But like, tuning, getting the signal clear. Maybe it's like your Wi-Fi. I don't know. Yes. But like, right. And so sometimes those mistakes or those mishaps or whatever are just helping us get more clear on what is our mission or our purpose or that divine part of us. And so it's just like, I always say, like, keep following the scent, follow the failure to like the next thing.
Yes.
It's amazing. So when you think about like something that somebody can do, like an action step that they can take to get started on this, and maybe it's just like a daily money mindset practice or some sort of like thing that they can do or be on the way to their creation of a good money mindset. What is that? What do they do?
Well, I would suggest starting with getting clear on a money goal. We have goals for every other area in our lives, but a lot of women do not have a money goal. So I would say get clear, write out a money goal, and then create an affirmation. And all throughout your day, you're saying this affirmation. All throughout my day, I'm saying, I'm so happy and grateful now that I'm earning $80K a month. And I have anchors all around me. So my screensaver on my laptop is $80K now. My password on my phone is $80K now. And that's getting me comfortable with that level of money in my life. So I would say start there. That's one thing that they can do.
Let me ask you this, because I know there's some people who are like, yeah, but then what if I say that? And this goes for dating or love or creating anything. It's like, what if I say that and then it doesn't happen? Like that meant it didn't work. Like, which I disagree with. I mean, I think that it doesn't mean it didn't work. So what do you say to people who are like, so, they don't want to even have a goal because they don't want to be disappointed?
Well, if there's no goal, then I guess just be prepared to accept the same.
Yeah, right.
And it will happen. 80K is not going to happen overnight, but you will start noticing all the money that's coming in that you possibly didn't notice before. So you start appreciating and noticing what is coming in more. And it's a goal like any other goal. You have to work towards that. And I believe since you're thinking about that, you're going to start noticing all the different ways for it to work.
Well, yeah. And I would say like right in alignment with what you're talking about here is that if that's like, just like, you're like, yay, now I just learned a limiting belief. I believe it's supposed to happen tonight, or why don't you think that's possible? Or because really for me, it was like, there were different levels of abundance and creation in my journey. Right. And so the only reason I can share with you about like my ancestors was because it was as recent as like, last summer, right? Where I was like, I want to create more impact. I want to reach more people. Right? Not like, oh, I want to make more money, right? I do want to have more security. I want to have more abundance. I want to make more of an impact. And I was like, what is going on with that? Right? So I think looking at that money goal, right? And you're affirming it. And then when and if it causes you to have doubt, or there's your result is showing you something, it's just the universe saying, hey, there's a lesson over here. You need to learn, right? You need to do some work around this. And I love that you said it doesn't happen overnight. So what's a piece of advice like that our listeners can kind of hang on to, like while you're in the journey, right? And you've made that decision. How can they sort of life check themselves to like stay on path and on purpose?
It's definitely having anchors around, reminders around. Because you will from time to time get in a funk. You may like, oh, nothing is coming in, or this stuff doesn't work. But if you have reminders all around you, anchors all around you, you can quickly shift from that way of thinking. Because that way of thinking will show up. but it's about not staying in that way of thinking and shifting to another way of thinking. So my suggestion is just having anchors all around to remind you.
I love that. And one thing that I've been doing, which I think is in alignment with like all of your teaching, is I just keep, and this is my word of the year, Choyo, is radical faith, right?
Nice.
You know,
Yes.
and I'm like, okay, like if I'm having any limiting belief about anything, I'm learning how to play golf. And I'm like, this is a metaphor of my life. I'm like, wow, like this is teaching me so much about my mindset. But I keep asking these questions like, okay, well, am I not having faith in myself? Am I not having faith in other people? Or like the people that I'm working with, or like the process, right? Or what am I not having faith around? Or am I just like not having faith in that divine source? Right. And so like in the end, it's like, well, it's always my responsibility. And so like, where can I step deeper into faith? Right. Because I believe, and I'm sure you do with the work that you do and your husband, like, you know, that greater source like wants the best, like we're supposed to have the best for us. Right.
Right. And a lot of times we don't even tap into that. So we have a silent partner, whether it's God, the universe, whoever. We have this silent partner and we never tap into that. And the analogy I like to use is like a toaster. If you don't plug the toaster in, you're not going to get toast. So we have to tap into our source, not our resource all the time, but we have to tap into our source. And then I think you would see a shift and see some results in your life.
Choyo, did you know that I was trying to toast my toast this morning and I didn't plug the toaster? I was literally like, I put the thing in and I'm like, wait, it's not going down. And then I looked at the outlet and I'm like, oh, it's not plugged in. And then I grabbed something else. Right. So this is a metaphor. So I was like, oh, I tried this business idea. And I'm like, oh, wait, let me try this. And I was like, wait, it's not working. So I was like, instead of going like, oh, I'm not meant to have toast today. No, I did not think that. I was like, oh, I'm not tapped into the right source. And I was like, oh, the little plug for the toaster is hiding. Then I plugged that in. Right. And I just think like we assume electricity is going to work. So I want everyone to practice what Choyo was talking about and be like, faith is just as reliable and there for you as the freaking outlet.
Yes.
So let's all eat toast. Next time you make toast, think of Choyo, people. I love that. Thank you so much for being here. You're brilliant. You all can find more about Choyo at choyodaniel.com. All of the goodness is on this show notes. She's on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. We'll put all those links in there. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your gift, your passion, your enthusiasm. I mean, like I hear you say it and I believe it. And I just so appreciate you being that like inspiration for all of our listeners.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
We're going to have coffee in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
Coffee and toast, baby. You and me. Exactly, with toast. Hey, ladies, whatever you do, check out Choyo and life check yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. So if being in an intimate relationship in which you feel 100% seen, heard, and accepted by a high caliber man is a priority for you right now, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit for working with me and my team at Dating with Dignity, here's what I want you to do. Just head over to DWD VIP, that's D as in dating, W, D as in dating, VIP.com, and book a call to speak with my team. We'll get on the phone with you for about 60 minutes and you'll get crystal clear on what's stopping you from finding true love right now. We'll also take a look at what you want to create, what you want your whole life to look like when you're able to finally be fully expressed as a woman in a healthy relationship with an incredible guy. And if we can help you get from where you are right now to where you want to be, we will show you the fastest path possible that makes sense for you to do that. We help smart, successful women all over the world solve this one missing piece in their life so they can finally have it all. So to see if we can help you do the same thing, head over to DWDVIP.com. I'm Marni Batista, and let's talk soon.